Hi folks, this is Tony Henry from Western Trail Rider. As many of you know who have been following me for quite a while, I've got a Dodge, a 2005 Dodge 3500 to pull my horse trailer rig, and I recently ran into a little bit of a problem in which I had an exhaust leak. Now, a year or so ago I installed a BD exhaust brake on my truck, which really helped in the towing, but apparently the back pressure from it caused some exhaust leaks between the exhaust manifold and the head. So I went to my mechanic and he told me that the Cummins exhaust manifold on these 5.9 diesels were not well designed and tend to crack and warp. So he said it's probably warped, and said about 99% sure that I was going to need a new one anyway. So I went out and bought a aftermarket exhaust manifold for my truck, and I selected BD. I like BD products and found them to be good quality, and read some reviews and things, and people liked them. And they also had a video on YouTube on how to install this particular exhaust manifold. Now, their install was on a 2001 Dodge. Mine being a 2005, there are some differences, and I ran into a few little quirks and problems, and so I thought I'd make a little bit of a video that might help out some of the people that with a year similar to mine, 2005, that what you might run into, what you might be able to, or what you might expect as you're working on your truck. Now, that is the BD manifold installed, and it comes with a really nice black ceramic coating that's kind of soft when you get it, but after the first couple of runs, when it gets up to operating temperature, it bakes that finish. It becomes very hard. Now, the silver that you're seeing on there, that is, I put some anti-seize on the manifold bolts, and it got on my fingers and I got it on the manifold, so that's not scratches or anything, that's just anti-seize material. Now you can see my BD exhaust brake right there, and I've had to pull out the exhaust or the turbo in order to do the install. Now that's not terribly difficult, but there are some things that you need to know, and I'll point those out in just a minute. Now, one of the things that I ran into is, you'll see that this is a two-piece manifold, and that is a ball joint right there in the middle, and it is a slip fit, and I don't know if it's a ball joint actually, but it is a slip fit, and it's a two-piece. My understanding is that when that heats up, it seals, and then the carbon from the exhaust actually seals it further, and so I should have no problems with my exhaust brake leaking there. Now, you'll notice that on each of these bolts there is a spacer there, and I bought new bolts for mine. I didn't trust reusing the old exhaust manifold bolts, and so I bought new bolts. All of mine came out fairly easily. You want to be really careful on those that you don't break a bolt off in the head. It has been said that if you'll run the vehicle up to full operating temperature and then crack the bolts a little bit, just loosen them just a hair once you turn the engine off, of course, that they'll come out of there without a problem. Now mine didn't. I didn't have to do that on mine. Mine came out without a problem anyway. But I will show you one thing here. Now you'll notice this bracket. This is the heater hose that comes from the inside heater coil, and it has a bracket right here. If I can get down there, it has a bracket right here, and that bracket goes over top of a manifold bolt that is right underneath this area here. Now it's an L-shaped bracket, and it has an end on it that goes over the bolt head, and that bolt has a stud on it just like what you see right here. Okay, now the problem is that they did not machine any clearance under there. They did not machine any clearance under there for the bolt head. And they have provided, BD has provided, a stainless steel bolt to go in there because there's just no clearance. Problem is that you won't have anywhere to attach the bracket. Now, the earlier model trucks had the bracket attaching to that bolt, and it came up and attached here and attached to that bolt there, and so the stud bolt was there and the bracket was up here high. Well, mine doesn't do that. Mine attaches underneath and attaches to that, and you know, not wanting to have to go out and buy a new part to get one of the later model or earlier model connections or bracket or tube there, what I had to do was grind down my bracket. See if I can find the one that they provided to me. I had to grind down my black bracket to clearance it so that it would fit on the bolt head with the clearance. I also had to go in on my machine lathe and turn down a number 14 socket. Yeah, this is a number 14. I had to turn down a number 14 socket so that it would go over that bolt or go over that nut head and still, you know, and be able to reach. So I got it on there and was able to get it tightened down, but that was a headache. It would be nice if BD had gone in there and clearanced that just a little bit to be able to get that bolt head in there. Now again, I recognize the fact that this manifold is made for a number of year models, and that just happened to be the problem for my year model. Now those bolts right there are all torqued down to 35 foot-pounds. You don't want to go too hard because it'll break them in the head. 35 foot-pounds. So now that that is installed, the next thing is to take the turbo and install the turbo. The problem is that, as you'll see, these two studs right there have to be replaced. They're too long. Now, if you'll notice here, see if I can get my camera right. If you'll notice here, the threads on the existing studs start at about 5/8 of an inch. Whoops, wrong one. Start at about 5/8 of an inch above the, is it focusing? Doesn't seem to be focusing right. Anyway, that measures about 5/8 of an inch on the stud to the threads. The problem is that exhaust manifold flange down there for mounting the turbo on the BD is a 1/2 inch. Right there. You'll notice that the old exhaust manifold, on the old exhaust manifold, this measures approximately 3/4 of an inch. Just a little, just a hair under 3/4 of an inch. So as you can see, those two studs have to come out. BD provides some replacement studs that have to be put in their place like that. Tony Henry again, and just to finish up the video that I started a couple of days ago, I finally got the studs out of my turbo mounting flange by the use of a stud remover that I bought from Napa Auto Parts for a cost of about $40, and it took them right out, and reinstalled the new ones. And just wanted to show those two nuts right there are 14 millimeter nuts, and the ones on the back are 15s. I only had two 14s, but the 14s will fit on there. The 15s, you can't even get a wrench on there. And as it is, with those 14 millimeter nuts, you can't get a box end in there. And so you have to tighten those two nuts up with a open end wrench, which means that there was no way for me to be able to put a torque wrench on there or adjust the torque. And I'm not even sure that I've been able to get those down to anywhere close to 35 foot-pounds. So the only thing I can suggest is that for those two nuts, just tighten them down as much as you can. And you'll see there the BD exhaust manifold has two plugs there for pyrometers, for EGT meters to be plugged in. I happen to have mine hooked in on the BD on the elbow for the BD exhaust brake. You can see it down there. That goes up to my pyrometer. I may move it up to here eventually because I'm sure that's a better reading. But make sure that you have snugged up those plugs and that they're not leaking. But that's it for my installation of the BD exhaust manifold. Again, all those bolts get torqued to 35 pounds, and those are supposed to be 35 pounds, but there was no way for me to get them to that. As far as running the vehicle, I've driven several, 30 miles maybe. Don't have any exhaust leaks. I'm happy about that. My exhaust brake is working fine. And everything seems to be doing all right on it. So overall, it was a difficult installation. Something that should take 3 to 4 hours took me about 8 hours if you include all the running around to get the necessary tools to, like the stud remover. But it needed to be done. I'm happy I've got it on there, and I'm pleased with the product. I just wish that BD would allow a little bit more clearance around those nut heads and stuff to make a little bit easier installation. So that's it for my installation of my BD Pulse exhaust manifold on a 2005 Dodge 3500 with a 5.9 Cummins engine. Thanks.